welcome back to this, the 28th installment of A to Z Sports. Usually we start with our opening words, our word from the wise, hero, good, etc., but we're starting it off a little bit different today. We are fortunate enough to have Penguins Vice President of Communications, Tom McMillian. And Tom, welcome and thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thanks, guys, for having me. It's been 33 years since I've been in this studio when I was a student, so strangely it looks pretty much the same.
Andrew, take it away.
Okay, well, since we're just getting started here, I kind of want to know, in the past couple of seasons, obviously, the Penguins have become a really huge success in the sporting world. And so how did they go so quickly from being a team that really, was kind of, almost on the brink of moving to a different city, and now they're one of the most respected franchises in all the sports? How'd that happen so quickly?
It's amazing because there's just I'll answer the question, but a book just came out in the last 6 or 7 years that was written, or has been written, by a adjunct professor, Andrew Conti of the Trib, which is called Breakaway, which describes all of that, because it is, you're right, it is in some ways an absurd story. I mean, this was a team that was in bankruptcy, then came out of bankruptcy and did pretty well, but then really plunged to depths and was, one of the worst teams in the league for 2 or 3 years. No hope of a new arena. No CBA, the economic system didn't work, and there really was a danger that the team wasn't going to make it. But all this, everything came together kind of with obviously the lockout ending and winning the Sidney Crosby lottery, and we got the arena deal done. It's kind of been a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm of bad things to put the organization on the brink, and then it's been a perfect storm of really good things. Hopefully we've been able to take advantage of some of those things as well, but it's been a rapid rise. Certainly a lot of it focused to the day that the Sid lottery was the same day the lockout ended, so that was a big day in Penguins history.
You often have a lot of, just in general in sports, you have a lot of guys that hold charity events, but it's usually the charity arm that kind of creates the events. You just had the Locomotive event arranged kind of by Evgeny Malkin and Alex Ovechkin of the Capitals, two of the biggest known Russian players right now. What is it like when, instead of just the organization or the charity arm just raising something, it's the players that do it and support it, and it gathers the support of everyone for a huge event to support such a tragedy in hockey?
In a way, it's even more motivating, because those events, events that do public good are always fun to do. But something like this obviously couldn't be planned. Many of your events are planned. They happen every September or every December. This one, was because of a tragedy. But when you have a player come to you and say, "I want to do this. This means a lot to me," you really want to pull together for that player and make sure it happens. Because, especially, Gino coming over, it takes a while to learn the language. It takes a while to get comfortable. I think it's also a sign that he's very much more comfortable here. But he went to Ray Shero right away and said, I would like to do something. Obviously, he had some ideas, didn't know exactly what to do, but he wanted to do something. And he wanted to make sure that the Penguins did something that was branded for us. The bracelets that they did were kind of done by every team in the league. But we just looked at the schedule then, and it was too obvious that when we played an early game against Washington with Ovechkin coming in, and have those guys do the opening faceoff. Now, neither of them knew that Mario Lemieux was going to drop the puck, so that was even a surprise for them. So those things are, out of a horrible tragedy, you can have a very I don't know if you want to call it a good time, a very fulfilling time, raising money for a good cause, and it makes the player, in this case Evgeny Malkin, feel so good, because he felt that he could do something. He knew a lot of those players, and he wanted to do something for the people back home.
Going back to the topic of my original question a little bit here, the Penguins played against the Los Angeles Kings in the preseason in Kansas City. What was it like playing in Kansas City when the Penguins came so close to moving there just a couple of years ago?
It was a little bit ironic. Without that Kansas City option, some of this doesn't happen. Having the ability to have, you almost, when you're coming down to the wire on arena negotiations, if there's no place where you possibly could go, you have no leverage. That the opportunity of going there, which was real, and in Andy Conti's book he talks about that. I mean, our lease was running out. We needed a place to play. Nobody wanted to go, but negotiations weren't working. So the fact that there was a building there where a team could have moved did provide an option, and ultimately that's what enabled us to achieve the goal that we wanted, to stay here in Pittsburgh for the long term. So it was interesting going back to the Kings owners obviously own that building and operate in Kansas City. They still don't have a tenant, but I think you're going to hear Kansas City used in the near future whenever an NHL or NBA team is on the brink, because it's a great new arena, it's a modern arena, it's ready to be moved into by someone. They need a tenant. So you're gonna see a little bit of that, but it was a little surreal. But I was glad, as Ray Shiro said at our season ticket holder event, he says, "I'm glad to report we're going to Kansas City and then flying back after the game."
You also you sell out the seats every single game at this point, and you have 9,000 people waiting at the season ticket waiting list. So with that being said, both Andrew and myself are college-age students. This is a college campus. You have the student rush that kind of partially answers the question, but how important are the college age, this kind of generation, to the Penguins and the future?
It's the most important group, and I think there are multiple reasons for that. We did a branding study a few years ago to find out what our brand was. It's very important. I mean, you can come up with slogans and things, but it's very important to find out who you are, and what was explained to us by the company we hired is your brand is what. It's not just your logo. People think, the brand of Coca-Cola is not just a Coca-Cola logo. It's what people think of the product. So it's really what people think of you. People, the fans, tell you what it is. And the one thing that surprised us that came back is we thought it was going to come back and we were going to get wrapped up in the traditional Pittsburgh blue-collar, hard-working Pittsburgh Steeler kind of brand. And they said no. What they found was that, didn't know where quite the line was, but about 30 or 35 years of age, below that, they talked about the team's immense popularity with that group. From that point on, everything we have done branding and marketing-wise has focused on that group. The reason being that the Steelers are one of the iconic brands in all of professional sports because it's ingrained. It's passed on from father to son, mother to daughter over generations. Now, you can't develop that in 5 years or 10 years because it takes generations. But I think what we see an opportunity now is with this generation, if we can reel them in and make them deep, passionate Penguins fans, we will then be able to achieve what the iconic brands have, which is father to son, mother to daughter. It becomes and that's always been a challenge for hockey teams in the United States, because hockey hasn't been as natural a sport to pass on as football, baseball, and basketball. And again, you can't do it in your first 10 or 15 years of existence. So that's really the reason. There's been so much loyalty, so much passion. It's great to have students in the building. It's great to have them on your bandwagon. But there's a business reason why you want to keep doing that. We need to keep cultivating that. When Student Rush began, there were a lot of seats. We could get a lot of students into the games. Now, I mean, it's a good problem to have, but now we don't have many seats available. We don't have any seats available. So we do hold 200 seats a game for Student Rush, and then we do 5 or 6 games during the season where we do about 500 or 600 seats. One of those is tomorrow night against Montreal. It's one of our expanded Student Rush nights where we'll create the traditional line down Fifth Avenue and get a lot more students in the game. We have prizes and giveaways afterwards. So that's a long answer to your question, but it's the most important demographic in our mix.
For those who are, sorry Andrew, but for those that are interested in the Student Rush, I heard a little birdie told me that tomorrow is Pizza Hut night. Is there any perhaps possible truth to this?
I have no comment.
well, sticking on the topic of the younger...
Still go.
Sticking on the topic of the younger generation here, we talked a little bit about Facebook and Twitter. And how do you think that's affected the Penguins organization and maybe even the NHL, with it really becoming a big success over the last couple of years here?
I mean, it's changed everything, not just for us, but teams and companies. I mean, not just in the sports world, and companies everywhere. But I think in our business, where it's not a necessary product, it's a choice of entertainment, but people get very passionate. The difference, and it's probably harder for guys of your generation to understand because you pretty much grew up with this stuff. But for those of us who were around a few years before that, you can now communicate with your fan base directly. That's an immense advantage over the way things used to be. We've gone aggressively after Facebook and Twitter again because we're very popular among young people. It makes a lot of sense. We're one of the most successful NHL teams that way. Popularity helps but we can get to them directly and communicate, even from a news standpoint. Just say, you know, you make a trade or you sign a player. Certainly 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, the only way we could get that word out was to type up a press release, put it on a fax machine, fax it to all the media outlets, the newspapers and television stations, and hope that they used it. Because we had no way to communicate with our fans directly. We needed the media to be our conduit. Now, while the media is still very important and we still do those things, not with a fax machine, but we email them, but we can get that kind of news or promotional news or any kind of reaction to our fans directly. And it really has changed everything. For your generation, I think it's tremendously exciting if you want to be in these fields, because there are more opportunities now for younger people than ever before, quicker, because you understand this stuff better than the executives do. And it's where everything's going. There's no textbook on it yet. There's no way to do it. It's happened so fast that there really isn't a template to do it. We're all kind of experimenting. And you know, we just hired a director of social media. That position did not exist until 3 months. We were very successful last year with it, but it was kind of a hodgepodge thrown together by 5 people. So with our team, with sports in general, with the business world, everything is changing because of that. I mean, I was even thinking, just so you guys realize, watching in the studio here, I did a sports talk show on stations in Pittsburgh in the early 90s. The internet didn't exist. So you just did the weather report and you were able to read it off a screen. When I read it, somebody had to type it out and hand it to me. It's not all that long ago. Things have changed so quickly. If I got a question, I couldn't look up the answer on the internet. I had to wait for a commercial break and go pick up a book and page through it. So I think those are just some examples. But those of us who now work in our executives, we remember that. That was our life. That's the way we made our livelihood. Things have changed so much, and they're going to continue to change. And I think probably someone from your generation will write the textbook and develop the kinds of companies, the advertiser and marketing companies that really specialize in this, because no one's nailed it down yet.